This is Streets and People, conversations about people and projects shaping how we move. Find us at getaroundcaboolture.au. Today we're doing one of our People and Projects episodes. I am amazed to be here in the studio with Andrea Herklots of Everybody eBikes. Andrea, I know you through, basically we're both in the same kind of space, trying to do inclusive transport options. And Everybody eBikes offered us an e-bike a couple of years ago when we did our first week without driving. So I'm very grateful for that gift. I know it was very well received. I'm here on Gubby country in Queensland, in Caboolture. And Andrea, whereabouts are you at the moment?
So we're based now in a suburb called Gaythorne in Brisbane, which is a really cute little tiny suburb sandwiched between Mitchelton and Enoggera, if people know the army base.
So that's on the north side of Brisbane. The reason we're here is because we bumped into each other the other day at the protest ride about the new legislation, because it's quite a change from the current legislation and will have huge impact. So I thought it'd be great to talk about the impact of the legislation for you and your communities. But before we go there, perhaps you could say what made you interested in creating Everybody eBikes and why does it still matter to you today?
Some people would know us actually as Blind Freddy electric bikes. So Blind Freddy Electric Bikes is a business we bought in 2019 because of our passion for sustainable transport options and giving people the option not to have to buy really, really expensive bikes, but to be able to use an e-bike as a primary way of getting around town and being able to do the shopping, get to school, those sorts of things. When we purchased the business in 2019, it had already been going for about 12 years. So it was one of the longest standing electric bike specialist business in Queensland. The reason we now have changed our name to Everybody eBikes is we felt that it better described our sentiment, which is around trying to get everybody who wants to ride a bike able to ride, both on two wheels and on three.
And so you cater a lot to the community of people who have disabilities or who've been aged out of driving or maybe aren't aged into driving, all sorts of different communities. So tell us a little bit about who you cater to a little bit more directly, because I know you more for your work with people with disabilities. And in fact, there was somebody, she has short stature, dwarfism, and so she said, I can't ride a bike. And I said, you need to go to Everybody eBikes because you have the only bicycle for people with dwarfism. Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually the only electric bike for people with dwarfism in the world. We have been able to work with another company over in America to actually promote the bike and get it ridden by people with dwarfism. So in America, they're called little people. Over here, we refer to people with dwarfism as short-statured. And in New Zealand, it's little people again. So it's just people who have a body geometry that doesn't suit a standard bike. It's been really exciting because it's a very small cohort on the world stage, but it's a key challenge to be able to fit someone when they've got very short limbs, arms and legs. The Lightning is the product that we designed and we can stabilize it so it behaves like a trike as well. It's just amazing because when we went to America with it, we had about 300 people able to ride the bike there and then. And a lot of them, even men in their late 50s, said, I've never ridden a bike, never, ever been able to get on a bike. And they rode. And it's just, it's really uplifting. All Richard's design expertise.
So what made you and Richard interested in this area and why do you keep going with it?
Certainly, sometimes at the moment you think, why? We keep going because every day we have this amazing joy of seeing people change their lives. And a lot of people will work all of their life, but not really feel like they have purpose. And let me preface that by saying that I had a very interesting career for over 30 years. I was a satellite imagery analysis specialist, working with all tiers of government and working with the private sector on all different ranges of projects. So coming to e-bike world, it is something that we embraced, but without necessarily a huge amount of expertise when we took on the business. And really what drives us now is seeing the difference that we can make to people's lives, whether it's a young family who are looking for a cargo bike to be able to take their kids to and from school, or an older couple who want to do rail trail adventures. Through COVID, what we saw were all those people that couldn't actually go for a walk in their local neighbourhood because they can't walk that far. We started looking at solutions to get people who had compromised mobility to ride a bike, and that did rapidly expand our range of three-wheel options rather than just two-wheel options. And we still cater to that broad range of riders today, from two-wheel folding bikes, trekking bikes, cargo bikes, and trikes. Not your average bike shop.
But you're clearly still very passionate about it. So you're really determined. So what is it that sits with you that makes you want to keep going even in these very difficult times?
It's people's stories. When somebody comes to you and at times you're the last resort, they have been to the local bike shop and they've tried to get on bikes and they're scared and they're nervous and they're wobbly. We, in the nicest possible sense, say that we do specialise in getting wobbly riders confident and being able to just give people those hands-on tips of how to let their body enjoy the experience of riding and then to see them ride independently. And they come back in and they might be doing a service or whatever and they go, I've done 400 kilometres since we last saw you. And that sense of achievement and the independence and the sense of fun that it brings to people's lives, no matter what their background, people love to get on a bike and ride. It's that sensation of the wind in your hair and a sense of freedom and joy, being able to go on adventures. Every day, the little kids on cargo bikes, their parents come in really nervous that the kids won't like it. They get on and they just go, oh my God, this is so much fun. And they're waving and laughing and kids instantly take to riding a bike. It's wonderful.
We thought it'd be good for you to share why this legislation is so problematic. So we'll just quickly go through some of the aspects of the law. It says here, ensure only appropriately qualified riders use e-mobility devices by introducing a minimum rider age of 16 and requiring a valid driver's license of any type or class, effectively setting a learner license as the minimum. The next one is enhance enforcement powers and offence regimes to deter unsafe and illegal behaviour by, this goes into much more about the police powers and drink riding and other dangerous behaviours, I would say. Ensure all parties involved in e-mobility use contribute to safety outcomes by enabling enforcement action against parents. So what it's saying is if a child behaves with an illegal device, that parents are then responsible for that, requiring e-mobility providers to ensure riders meet age and licensing requirements, and prohibiting the sale of e-mobility devices and motorbikes not eligible for full registration. It's also talking about modernising e-mobility device definitions and standards, so that's coming up with a particular standard, and then protect pedestrians by improving the use of footpaths and other shared spaces through providing a consistent 10 km/h speed limit for all e-mobility devices on footpaths and shared paths, encouraging safer parking of e-mobility devices so it doesn't obstruct people who park badly on the footpath, and allowing PMDs to be used on any road up to 60 km/h to support rider choice and reduce traffic on the footpaths. And what I should also say is that there is also a new requirement because of the definition of the new e-mobility devices. It's a particular European standard that was brought in that doesn't, my understanding, have any what's called grandfathering, where you allow people to just wear through the current ones and then when they buy a new one you can then pick that up. It's asking for submissions on Friday, so I think that's about an overview of what I've understood. What have I missed in the legislation that you would like to include?
There's a lot to unpack in that, and just let me reiterate, we will cover this at the end, but the submission, if you have something that you would like to share with the government, you've got until 10 a.m. on the 10th of April to put the submission in. It doesn't have to be lengthy. I think something that's very clear to listeners was the number of different points you just addressed, this is a radical change to the current scenario for riding a bike. At the end of the day, we just want to ride a bike on the existing infrastructure that is already available to us. We would love to have better infrastructure and separated bikeways, but we have what we've got at the moment, and most people that I've spoken to would like to continue to be able to access that infrastructure in the way that they have done for the last 100 years or whatever. I think possibly the best way to start would be to cover off on the element of this which will affect most riders. The 10 kilometre an hour speed limit is on footpaths. And you think, well, that's fair enough. If you're riding on a footpath and other people are on the footpath, then you need to slow down and be respectful, and you need to give people the opportunity so that you can ride past them safely and they're not scared. That's essentially what most people do anyway. When we ride on footpaths, if somebody's coming towards us or we have to go around an obstacle, we slow down, we might ring our bell, we might call out and say passing on the right, but we use the age-old tenet of a bit of courtesy and respect for shared use. And if there's something funny to say, we might say something out loud as well to the person as you pass by, or I quite often will comment on a child that's riding a bike on the footpath and say, good riding, give a little bit of encouragement if they're a bit wobbly or whatever, or well done for staying to the left, things like that. The legislation as it stands relates to any path that is shared use. And unfortunately in Queensland, that includes most of the bikeways. Bikeways are not dedicated bikeways in the main. There are a few, but they're very few and far between. Most of the paths that are council maintained are actually shared use. I, for example, ride to and from work on a bikeway called Kedron Brook. It runs from the coast along the Kedron Brook and goes west. And it's one of the main conduits for people getting to and from an access point to get into the city, but also joins a lot of the suburbs in the inner city on the north side. It's quite a large route and it's also quite wide. So the path in most places is over 2 meters wide. It was designed for shared use between pedestrians and bike riders. We're now going to have to ride 10 kilometres an hour on that bike. And I actually did a test the other day. I saw these two runners who looked like they were having a nice, comfortable jog. And I sat behind them and said, don't mind me, I'm not being weird. I just want to check the speed. And I sat behind them for, I don't know, maybe 100 metres, and then came up alongside them and said what I was doing was just testing how far you got away from me when I was at 10 kilometres an hour and you were obviously running at about 12, 14, 15 kilometres an hour. And they laughed and I said, in your opinion, would you classify yourself as a fast runner, an average runner or a slow runner? They actually said, we're just average runners. And so what it would mean to an individual riding an e-bike on Kedron Brook is that they would be running faster than we would be riding. The other very clear observation is it's actually quite hard to ride a bike at 10 kilometres an hour. The TMR actually have that on their website, that it's below the safe speed to ride a bike. You become too wobbly. And the other thing that was really evident was I kept having to look down to see what my speedo was saying because I constantly exceeded the 10 kilometres and was, even on the flat, I was going over 12 kilometres and then having to pull it back and brake. It was a very uncomfortable experience for somebody who rides on that path every day. And I must say that since I did that test, I have not repeated riding at 10 kilometres an hour, and I won't until I absolutely have to, because it's just ridiculous. Now, I ride frequently. So Kedron Brook is used by a lot of people who are not confident riders. Their mums and dads, grandparents, getting out with the kids, maybe visiting, not familiar with the infrastructure. And we all seem to get along at the moment with just that sense of courtesy that I spoke about before, without having to shout at anybody, without having to scare anybody or make people feel unsafe because of the speeds. The fastest riders on Kedron Brook on a daily basis, besides the nightmare e-motorcycle riders, are people, generally men, wearing lycra, trying to break their Strava record on their road bike. It's not the e-bike riders who, by purpose, will only sit on about 24 kilometres an hour because you don't get assistance after 25. It's going to make a lot of people choose to ride on the road because it's just not tenable to actually ride at 10 kilometres an hour. And forcing young families with cargo bikes onto the traffic, I think, is a really bad way of encouraging sustainable transport within our city. And I think we're going to see more accidents because of people being forced to ride on the road because they don't feel safe riding 10 kilometres an hour. I can only hope that that is one of the key messages that the committee takes on board. They look at their own department's recommendations and the speed is kept at 25 kilometres an hour with a slowing of the speed when passing somebody within a shared space, some other user, whether it's a bike rider, a pram, a dog. It's not just pedestrians, it's everybody.
I actually once hired a mobility scooter because a friend of mine came and visited me. So I went 40 minutes on one of those mobility scooters and I was going along and I went, oh my goodness, on the footpath. What you don't realize is that when you've got driveways, there's a lot of crossfall. Now that's a technical term which means the slant that you get when you are going along on infrastructure. And then it suddenly slopes down and then it comes up. So crossfall is where there's a bit of a gradient in one direction. And I became aware of how dangerous it is to sit in a mobility scooter. The amount of variability in the crossfall that you have to navigate when you're on a mobility scooter and also on any e-device at all, you become very aware of that.
What you're describing is what an upright trike feels like. So an upright trike is impacted by that crossfall or the camber of the road. Typically when you're riding a trike, if you're riding on the road rather than on a footpath, then the roads are designed to wick the water away from the centre where the cars are to the gutters, and the gutters are lower than the centre of the road. That change in camber or the curvature of the road surface is most pronounced towards the gutter, and that's where a trike rider will be forced to ride if they're trying to ride in traffic because they can't go at the same speed. Please don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating that a trike rider should go any faster than 25. Most people who've ridden an upright trike, for example, would know that going over 20 feels quite scary. You want to be able to ride to the conditions and you want to be able to keep safe. If you are forced onto the footpath because of the road conditions, you will have every driveway you go across, the trike will try and go down the driveway, so you've got to counter it as you're riding along. And then every road intersection that you come to, you've then got to navigate the cut-throughs that take the footpath down onto the road surface. So that's something that is specific to trikes. It's much easier on a two-wheel scooter or on a two-wheel bike because your body does the balancing so that you can accommodate that.
And so let's talk about some other points in the legislation. So you've got licensing requirements for under 16s, and we've also got this new EN specification, which is the European legislation. Let's speak to that. How will the legislation as it is proposed affect your customers and other people?
So the European standard that was adopted by Australia back in the early 2020s was the EN 15194 standard. So that's been around for a long time. A lot of electric bikes are imported with those core principles of EN 15194. There have been numerous revisions to the standard, and the contentious element of the recommendations is that they have picked out a revision rather than the generic standard. And that revision means that any bike that was purchased prior to, I think it's 2023, that revision would not have existed and therefore it can't comply to it. But I really do believe that will not stay in the legislation. They cannot make a bike that was imported under the European standard in 2020 now illegal because the new revision didn't exist at that point in time. So I think there will be grandfathering or a revision to the way that's presented in the standard. That is a standard that is designed for two-wheel bikes. It covers off on the two key elements of a bike design. One is the mechanical elements of the bike, and the other is the electrical elements of the bike. Because it's an e-bike standard, most people don't even think about the mechanical side of it. They focus on the electrical side of it. And within that, there are three main conditions that should be met. First is that the bike is pedal assist only, so the motor only helps when you're pedaling. And the motor must cut out when you pedal over 25 kilometres an hour, which is why I said on Kedron Brook, none of the e-bike riders are going very fast. The second element is the wattage of the motor. The wattage of the motor is the amount of force that you can get to assist you. And most e-bikes have 4 or 5 different levels of power that they can access that is user accessible while they're riding. And so on the flat, you might be in a low level of power, so you're not drawing much of the wattage off that motor. And as you come to a hill, you may increase the amount of power that you're drawing off the motor to a maximum continuous rated level of 250 watts. That doesn't mean that the bike maximum or peak power is 250. On a mid-drive e-bike that is EN 15194 compliant, if it has a Bosch system, for example, the peak power for the Bosch mid-drive is around 750 watts. That's peak, not continuous. People get very confused about those two descriptions. If you have a hub drive motor, if it's 250 watt, the peak maximum potential when you really push hard on those pedals and you've got it in the highest level of power and you're in the right gear, it will give you about 500 watt. So there is a difference between hub motors and mid-drive motors. And then the third element of the standard goes back to its core principles, which is primarily pedal assist. When it's pedal assist, that means that you do not have a throttle by which you can just sit there and get the bike to take you to 25 kilometers an hour without moving the pedals. A lot of bikes that have come through the import system over the last 3 or 4 years since they relaxed the definition of an e-bike now come through with a throttle, and the kids that we see, they are generally kids, there's not a lot of adults riding them. The e-motorbikes, they have throttles. Some of them don't even have pedals. So there is no pedaling going on. They're sitting at their maximum speed, which is way above the 25 kilometers an hour. And they are using what is available on a motorbike, which is a twist or a thumb throttle to achieve that without actually moving their body at all. And that's the core principles of EN 15194, to not have that system in place. It gets very confusing because every e-bike has something called walk assist. Walk assist will propel the bike without pedaling to about 6 kilometers an hour. It is designed for somebody to walk holding the handlebars, using walk assist, maybe to get up a steep driveway or something like that. It is not designed to be used when the person is sitting on the bike, because obviously with the draw off the motor, it's unable to actually get the bike to move 6 kilometers an hour. If walk assist actually worked when you were sitting on the bike, that's probably all most of us would actually need. So that's the EN 15194. Motor power 250 watt, continuous. Maximum speed 25 with assistance. You can go a lot faster downhill, but that's gravity assisting you, not power, off your e-bike. And it mustn't have a throttle that is capable of moving the bike without pedaling above 6 kilometers an hour. In terms of the principles for e-bikes that are imported, if they comply with those three elements, they should be considered by the government to be compliant with the principles of EN 15194. That's for e-bikes. What people don't realise, though, is that standard only applies to a two-wheel bike. It doesn't apply to a three-wheeler or a four-wheeler. And so no tricycle can comply to that standard. We can comply to the 25 kilometres an hour max, the 250 watt motor and the 6 kilometre throttle. but we can never comply with the mechanical definition of that standard. And most importantly, there are no testing labs in the world by which we can actually do the equivalent of the test for the mechanical part of the EN 15194 standard. All of our trike riders are very nervous. We do have some customers who have purchased legal, compliant e-bikes for their children so that they can travel longer, do e-mountain biking and things like that. So very much intergenerational activities. So usually parents riding with their children, maybe even grandparents riding with their children. We don't sell a lot of bikes for that cohort, but we sell a lot of bikes, or have sold a lot of bikes, to children under 16 who have a disability. Nobody really has thought about this. So we do work with children with cerebral palsy who have maybe compromised leg strength, one-sided weakness. We do work with people with muscular dystrophy, spina bifida, childhood strokes. So getting those children with a range of different conditions able to ride a bike is absolutely critical to have pedal assist access. And that's because if you have very weak limbs and you are trying to turn the pedals and learn how to pedal, when you get that inertia and the resistance of trying to push against getting the bike into motion, a lot of children who live with a disability will give up because it's too hard, it's fatiguing them, and they have to conserve their energy levels. So if you give them a very tiny amount of pedal assist, it can be, I call it the push me mum factor. It's making the difference between a child being able to get up a very slight incline independently with, say, 5% of the potential power of a motor, compared to stopping and saying, Mum, can you push me? I can't keep going. So our children who ride with electric pedal assist are doing it because they're living with a range of different conditions that make it impossible for them to ride a normal bike, a mechanical bike. And there's all these warriors that are going, don't be so lazy, just ride a two-wheel bike. What's wrong with you? Our work has been to actually give those children that are used to sitting on the sidelines, watching everybody else have fun, the opportunity to join in and actually really enjoy cross country, for example. For the first time, they actually can ride their bikes in cross country. These kids are not going fast. They may chase their family members and things like that, but they're not going anywhere near 25 kilometres an hour. And most of the time when we supply bikes for children with disability, we actually cap the speed at 12 kilometres an hour so that the family feel that they can handle the situation and that the child isn't going to get away from them when they're supervising. So all those kids, some of which have no other option to get outdoors and have fun, no other way of being able to ride on grass in the park with their peers, now are potentially going to be cut out of being able to do it again. So people that have been funded through the NDIS, where we've got the federal government saying these children need this assistive technology to enable them to participate fully, are now going to have it taken away from them. We've had families phoning up in the last couple of weeks. We have some very complex needs trikes where the family member is actually standing behind the trike and using a push bar to steer, but also to control the power. And they're saying, will it be taken away from me? Because the child that's actually on the bike is under 16, even though it's a parent that's controlling the brakes, the steering, and the power. But we don't know. We don't know the answers to that because it's not clear in the legislation as it stands.
I did watch the public hearing just the other day. There would be an opportunity for people to go back to the retailer to sort out the labelling, and you are a very small business. Suddenly you're going to have a lot of people going, I want new label on my e-bike or e-trike. It strikes me as being a lot of work, and I don't even know if you got a label, would you then comply? How would that work?
One of the criteria for the labelling is it has to be permanent and not able to be modified. So the label is not sitting on the outside of the paintwork, it's actually underneath the final coat. If somebody has an old e-bike that they can't demonstrate that it's compliant, you would need the testing lab to be able to test both the electrical side but also the geometric side, the frame strength I'm aware that there's a testing lab down in South Australia, but I know that they have a very long wait list for doing testing of wheelie walkers and beds and other disability equipment. For the three-wheel bikes, there is no framework for us to work to. When you're a retailer, you are bringing in the equipment that you believe complies in principle to the standard that is generally adopted, but we don't have the mechanisms by which to actually formally test and therefore sign off on a legal standing of all of our equipment. Every single bike would be different, and we have probably 20 different models in our range. I don't know how that would be possible, and I really don't know how the government would expect us to be able to deliver against that. Some of the big players, like they have had to do with the New South Wales legislative changes, they have either withdrawn from New South Wales or they have delayed selling into New South Wales so they can comply. I don't know what's going to happen at this end, but certainly the bikes that we have designed and we have imported specifically for our customer base with disability, I don't know how we would do it. Potentially you've got one of the most innovative assistive technology companies in Australia, probably one of the only ones, and I don't know, do we want our kids and our adults with disability not to have options again? To go back to the dark ages where if you couldn't get onto a bike, you just sit in a wheelchair? And obviously there's some people that will only be able to use wheelchairs, but I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is if somebody has the choice to be able to ride an adaptive electric trike, should they not have the right to do that?
Yeah, it's about independence.
I think it's not understanding that there are people on the margins. I don't think anybody disputes the fact that the e-motorbikes that are being ridden at 60, 70, 80 kilometres an hour are dangerous, and to ride them on footpaths, ridiculous, So I don't think anybody's got issues with those sorts of things and some of the other elements of the recommendations that have come out. But to ask a 90-year-old who has lived with a whole range of different complex medical needs over the last decade to give up her newfound electric trike because she can't get a license she's not medically fit to drive, has no intention of driving, and in fact doesn't actually ride a trike unsupervised either. She rides with her daughter. But people like that who are not going to be able to be licensed or have voluntarily surrendered their licenses, do we really want our older population to no longer be able to move? My view is that must then increase the burden on healthcare. People who want to remain active and to use their bodies and to maintain as much movement as possible are shown throughout research literature to have a better quality of life and to be able to put off, delay, or offset the need for additional interventions as they get older. And so I love it when I have, 90-year-olds come in, and some of them can't ride an upright trike because they are a bit tricky, but we have the semi-recumbent trike, which is an absolute dream to ride. I can get just about anybody riding that. I've got people with one leg. I've got people with one arm. I've got people with Parkinson's, stroke survivors, MS, MD, able to ride bikes when they really thought that they wouldn't be able to do it. Few of that cohort would be able to be medically fit to get a driver's license. So again, are we asking those people to give up the equipment that has been federally funded by the aged care system or NDIS and revert to having to drive? We actually want people to be active, to move their body, and to feel so good about being able to achieve small steps to actually be able to keep themselves healthy. That's what keeps us going. We see it every day, and it makes your heart sing when you see somebody being able to achieve riding and to do it with a smile on their face and waving and chatting while they're riding. It's just beautiful to see that their world is actually giving them the possibility to live again. And it sounds a bit dramatic, but believe me, people that come in for help in our business, they're looking for a way to actually bring joy back into their life, and we can offer that with the right equipment.
Loneliness, I think, has more health impacts than smoking a packet of cigarettes a day. I know from my own experience riding around just in Caboolture just how lovely it is, and I have friends because of riding around in the local neighbourhood. There are people I know who I just know because I'm riding around.
We see that with the cargo bike riders, the mums and dads who are doing the school pickup, and then on the way home, they'll stop at the local park and just have a bit of a play with the kids. People engage. If you drive, people don't engage with you. But when you actually ride and you are open to communicate and you're giving positive messages to those around you, you realise that you're actually part of a community. You're not just a person going from A to B. You're actually somebody who belongs. And that sense of belonging and connectedness is what stops people from being lonely. The potential to expand that is now coming about with the new types of equipment that we have. But this legislation has the potential to shut those down. And it's the people on the margins that are forgotten about. Right at the beginning of this talk, you asked me, why am I involved and why do I feel strongly about this? A lot of our customers would never speak out. They're scared. They're scared they'd lose NDIS funding, or they're scared that they're going to lose aged care funding or support from their network, or they actually just think that no one will listen to their story. And so the submission that we're going to put in as Everybody eBikes uses case studies of the people that have reached out to us in the last few weeks, sharing their story. They're brave enough to actually put it in writing. And that's what I want to get over to the committee, that these are real people. These are real scenarios. This isn't paperwork. This is changing people's lives. And riding a bike or a trike changes people's lives every day. And that's why we speak out, because those voices, there's no way somebody in their 80s would have ridden on the protest ride in the big smoke of Brisbane in the dark. So if they're not going to be there to be represented, I want to be there to try and share that messaging, not because of the business. It's not about selling bikes now. This is about human rights to be able to live a healthy, sustainable life and actually be able to use the equipment that is most appropriate for you without these measures inhibiting where you go and what you can do. Just want to be safe, happy, and have fun. Independent, bit of freedom.
Absolutely. We both want to say you can put in your submission, so I'll put that in the show notes so you can do that. You can write something small, a little note. If you want to put in a personal story, by all means reach out to Andrea or Everybody eBikes. I also will be doing one. I would reach out to your local bike shop or even just write an email to your local politician, whoever, if this is something that is going to impact you, to just speak about how it will impact you no matter what it is. What would you like to add before we close out? Anything else you want to share?
So basically it's just to reinforce that the messaging has to come across around the personal impact, the lived experiences, because the people making the legislation have not heard the voices of the people who are going to be negatively impacted that are not e-motorbike riders or high-powered scooter riders. So there's a minority that's very visible that is affected, there's potential change in our laws, but it's the majority that are going to be impacted. And if you do have the opportunity to speak, it doesn't have to be first person. You could ask somebody to put in a submission yourself. They just want to know who you are, what your emails are and things like that. It makes it very clear on the submission form, which Wendy will put up. Tell it as it is. Let's make the politicians read the true stories. I'm happy to include messaging in mine, but I am worried about the timelines now. So the more people that actually sound their voice and make them listen, every submission that goes in is documented. So every submission has to be retrievable if people ask for evidence of when people have requested support to their grandchild to be able to ride an e-bike because they live in the hilliest part of Brisbane or whatever and they've got to get to school. Just speak out, please.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I think we have covered a lot in the legislation. There's more to it, definitely. No one is saying we want children or adults to be in a dangerous space. So we're not advocating any of that. We're just saying people who don't have an alternative, who can't drive, they need something, because not everybody can drive. 1 in 5 adult Queenslanders are unlicensed. It's your and my cohort. And even those who can drive often want something else sometimes. That's what we're really looking to change. We can only hope that the volume of people who never normally submit speak out. That definitely makes a difference for sure.
And just on that, I'd never been to a demonstration or a protest in my life, and I'm getting on in my years, shall we say. That was the first time on Wednesday, but it was a very strong community event where all people from all walks of life and with all different types of bikes and trikes all came together just to say, come on, don't forget about us. We don't want this change.
Yes. Well, thank you, Andrea, for coming on. It's Easter Monday, so really appreciate you taking the time. I know you've got customers in the shop, so I'll leave it there. But thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for inviting me and to share the voices for some of my customers. It's a very important topic, and I appreciate that you've recognised that what we do is a little bit different. Thank you.
That's Streets and People. Thanks for listening. You can find more at getaroundcaboolture.au.